Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm back, continuing on with 60 Nights of Fright. And sorry about the delay. I took a week off. Sometimes life happens, right? But I am back, continuing on with the podcast. I do want to appreciate everybody who listened to episode 355, where I talked about Candyman, as well as talked about Tony Todd's legacy, not just in horror, but just in film in general. That was a very good episode for me. I really enjoyed talking about not only Candyman, but talking about Tony Todd's overall career. Because I think one thing about Tony Todd that kind of gets forgotten is that he was, even though he is a icon in horror, he's also, as far as an actor, he was a very good actor as well outside of the horror genre. And everything. Of course, I mean, he's very well known within the horror genre. Don't get me mistaken or wrong on that. But I also appreciated a lot of his work outside of the horror genre as well. But getting into this week's episode, this week I am going to be talking about some of my favorite final girls in horror, as well as spotlighting probably arguably the best final girl in horror, and I'm talking about one Miss Laurie Strode and everything. So that is what we're going to be getting into this episode, and just the evolution of the final girl starting from the 1970s up to, current day, and how they have evolved over time. So let's get into talking about one Miss Laurie Strode. I mean, of course, she was introduced in Halloween 1978. Of course, it was directed by John Carpenter, my favorite writer director, and it was the characters portrayed, of course, by one Miss Jamie Lee Curtis, and how she, in the role, pretty much, I want to say, inspired a generation to follow. Well, a generation or two that followed the character. Because one thing about the character of Laurie Strode, especially in the first movie, she's the one she's the calm one. She's the one that's always thinking, paying attention, aware of her surroundings. And she's probably the most vulnerable of them all, even though she's paying attention to her surroundings, and everything. But it's a very interesting character. I feel like it is the character that especially when the 80s rolled around, it feels like a lot of horror filmmakers, they modeled their main characters, their final girls, after Laurie Strode in a lot of ways. And how also too Laurie is the representation of just a regular, every woman and everything. She's not flashy or anything like that. She's just like a regular teenager who has to go through some extreme circumstances and come out on the other side, at least try to come out on the other side, right? So let's look at how this character evolves over the course of this long-standing franchise. So, of course, in Halloween, she is like I say, she's the calm. She's she's the virgin, because there's a whole thing in the movie about her being a virgin, but she does have a crush on the guy Ben Tramer, who unfortunately meets his demise in Halloween 2. Because Loomis is a damn madman, but that's another story and everything. But she's the innocent one. But she has those survival instincts, because when things get crazy, like when she goes across the street to the house and she ends up running into Michael Myers and he stabs her in the arm and she flips down the damn stairs and everything. But she finds a way to survive. She makes sure Tommy and Lindsay, they get out of the house and everything, and she survives long enough for Loomis to pull up and, shoot him 6 times, let off 6 shots, because, Loomis got that thing on him, right? But that's how she is in the first movie. And it's cool kind of watching the character in the first movie, because after the first movie, her innocence is gone. Like she's been through some things. She has that 1,000-yard stare at this point, right? So by the time we get to Halloween 2, where she's in the hospital, and I always find Halloween 2 very interesting, the fact that Laurie doesn't say a lot in this movie, and she kind of really doesn't even do a lot. Like she's in it, but she's not really in it. It's like Loomis, he's running around, getting teenagers killed and, getting into it with Brackett, who leaves, and then he has to deal with Mr. Hunt, who I never understand if Hunt is another sheriff or if he's just like next man up when Brackett leaves. I never fully understand that. And then with him dealing with Maureen coming back and basically like, no, you've been told that you need to go back to Smith Grove because you're doing too much around here and everything. But Loomis, he basically forces his way to the hospital to save Laurie once again and sacrifices himself. But in the second movie, she doesn't really do a whole lot. I mean, she's kind of in that bed for most of the time. And then it's like when she realized, oh, he's coming for me. I need to kind of limp my way up out of here some way. She managed to do so. But she doesn't really do a whole lot in the second movie, which I always found kind of interesting. So the next time we see Laurie is 20 years later in Halloween H2O, which is still the only movie of the original series that I've actually seen at the movie theater, and everything. But here she's old. She's 20 years older. She's more wiser. She has a teenage son herself, but she's still dealing with what happened to her all those years ago, and also trying to, live this normal life as best as possible. But then good old brother Michael, he comes a knocking once again, and she has to kind of go back into survival mode like she did those years ago. And I do like the fact that we get another fight between the two of them, but it's like she's more in control this go around than what she was 20 years ago. It's like I've been waiting for this, type of thing. And I mean, how that movie ends with her pretty much chopping his head off, because at that point, that is what it was. That was supposed to be the end. But of course, the studio said, oh, y'all made some money, so we gonna flip the script. And it wasn't really Michael that she killed. It was just some poor guy who Michael, switched places with and everything. And then that's how she ended up in a mental hospital and in Resurrection. And then they kill her off. But I mean, you can never really kill off Laurie Strode, right? Because she comes back in 2018 because we spew the timeline off into another tangent. And she's back, and this time she's not only is she a mother, but not mother to John, she's mother to Karen, and Karen has a daughter, Allison. And you get these 3 generation of, Strode women basically, who have to go against Michael Myers in their own different ways. And one thing I like about Halloween 2018 is not so much what Laurie does, but what they do with the Karen character, because she plays an interesting role in that movie, where it's like, no, everything that she's doing is on purpose. Like how she's like, oh my God, I don't understand what's really going on and all this type of stuff, right? But at the same time, she is the character. She's the one who has to be the one to get Michael down in the kill box, basically. And I always enjoyed it. And I don't think that gets talked about enough when we're talking about Halloween 2018 and everything. But Karen has the most interesting role to play. And it's all because of what Laurie taught her from a young age. She has to be, she kind of has to play the aloof one, in a way. And it does kind of suck that she's running around in this damn Christmas sweater during Halloween time. It's like, Karen, what are you doing? But it is what it is. And just seeing how Laurie in that movie goes from being, she makes the full transformation, because it's like now, all of these years later, I've been preparing my entire life, because I knew at some point you were going to come back. Because basically what they did was they said everything that happened after Halloween 1978, none of that exists. We caught him that night. Loomis didn't die that night. They caught him, because they do show how it all happened. in the sequels and everything, that they actually caught him that night. So she never ends up in the hospital. Well, she does go to the hospital, but she doesn't have to fight against him and everything like that. And he's not actually her brother and all this stuff. Just some, he is the walking epitome of evil on two legs that just got, locked in on her basically, and everything. But how Laurie is like the ultimate survivalist at this point, even though she's kind of looked at as the crackpot of the town and to a degree, but it's like this woman went through hell. Her friends were brutally murdered when she was a high school senior, and everything, and she had to fight against this maniac in this damn William Shatner mask and everything. So yeah, she kind of would be a little bit off the rails, and she just knew that, okay, he's still in Smith Grove, and at some point he was going to come back, which he does, because some damn no good podcasters decide to go pulling up on him at Smith Groves and pull out the mask, and it kind of kicked up the old, them old feelings he once had, and that's how you get things going again, and everything. But I always enjoyed like how she is like in full fight mode in all three of the new trilogy, between Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. She's just in complete, like, I gotta fight, cause especially in Kills, she's in the freaking hospital, and it's like, no, I gotta get up out of here, cause I gotta go find this dude and everything like that. And then of course in Halloween Ends, like, she gets to have that fight with him once again. It's like Laurie is a fighter, and that's one thing about the character throughout the course of the entire franchise, whether it's whichever timeline you want to look at. One thing about it, Laurie Strode is a fighter, and everything, and how because of her character, how it inspired a lot of other characters who followed to be fighters and have to stand up and fight against whatever the evil was. And like I said earlier, I think she was the archetype, I should say, of characters who followed that. Okay, we're going to model this character after this one particular character, because not too many characters before Laurie was like this. I mean, yeah, you have Olivia Hussey's character in Black Christmas, but that she's not so much a fighter per se. And then the way the movie ends, it's like, well, she didn't get the right person, because the phone is still ringing and everything, and she's in the house, and Billy is still out there basically, and everything. But then how you have Sally in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's not so much the Sally fault. I mean, she did have to fight up out that damn house, to get out to the street so that the hitchhiker could get his ass ran over by that 18-wheeler. But she's not so much a fighter in the same way that Laurie is a fighter. You don't really, like I say, if you look at the quote unquote final girls before Laurie and then the final girls after Laurie, you can tell very much a difference. Like, Laurie is where it starts, with the final girl being a little bit more aware and more, just, okay, I'm going to try to take the fight to him as much as he's taking it to me. Because even before she gets stabbed in Halloween, well, no, when she goes back to the house in Halloween in 78 and everything, and she realized that the window's open because somehow Michael didn't creep through the window and everything, she stabs him with that damn, sewing needle, stab him in the neck and everything. And then she stabbed him with the hanger, the wire hanger and everything like that. So she was fighting against him and everything. But it just shows like how she goes from being a victim to a survivor to a fighter throughout the whole, series and everything. And that's always been, a great thing, and what kind of makes Laurie be Laurie in a way. So real quick, so we're gonna jump over to one of my side topics for this episode. So let's talk about the evolution of the final girl, because like I said, talking about Laurie Strode, she is the archetype and everything. So the whole thing about final girls, like I said, you have Laurie Strode, you have Sally from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In a way, they both, to a degree, help shape what we see of the final girls that would come along in the 80s. More so Laurie than Sally, but you still had some Sally-ish type horror girls in the 80s as well. because like I said, Sally did have to fight. She had to endure sitting at that table with the family as they pretty much losing their minds in front of her. She's kind of losing her mind. And then she's getting hit in the back of the head by decrepit ass grandpa and everything. So she literally had to fight up out of there, right? To just be able to get out to the street so that the truck driver, would come along and pretty much save her. And then she get in the back of that pickup truck when she's laughing like a mad woman as the truck is riding away, and Leatherface is pissed because she got away, type of thing. But then when you get into the 80s, now here where you get like the Nancys, which I always say is a Laurie Strode daughter. That's how I always look at it, like as far as horror goes. Like if Laurie is the mother, Nancy would be the daughter in a way. And we're just talking about the evolution of the final girl. That's what I mean by daughter, not in the literal sense, but in the final girl, family tree, if you will. If Laurie is the mother, Nancy would be the daughter to a degree. And then after that, you kind of get your offshoots and everything like that. Because Nancy, in a way, is like Laurie Strode. She's the nice girl. She's the innocent, and everything, until everything starts to go to hell and her friends start getting killed. And then she's trying to solve, like, what the hell is going on? Like y'all knew about this man, but y'all didn't realize that he was going to come back as a dream demon. I don't think nobody knew that. But y'all did this terrible thing. Y'all did it was the right thing, but also it was a terrible thing, and didn't think that, it was going to come back on us, the kids, or anything like that at some point. And so Nancy becomes a fighter, and how she pretty much, home alones her way through the end of the original Nightmare on Elm Street is kind of funny when you think about it and everything, but it's somewhat similar to having to fight against Michael Myers for Laurie. Nancy does the same thing with Freddy Krueger, but at the end of that movie, Freddy still quote unquote wins in a way, and everything. But then also in Friday the 13th, Alice comes along, and how she has to, take on Mrs. Voorhees, and they have their damn ECW street fight in the damn out there at the camp and everything, which is kind of hilarious. But I will say this. Mrs. Voorhees did beat the hell out of Alice in that movie. I mean, she slapped the hell out of her a number of times, and it's like, it's like, I don't know if Alice is going to be able to get out of it, but I think by her getting slapped like that, it was either I'm going to fight or I'm going to die. And Alice was like, yeah, you done slapped me just one too many times, so off with your head, you go. But then, of course, the whole thing where in the second movie, Alice ended up getting got, by Jason and everything. And then you get the Jennies come along, which I always wish that we would have got more of Jenny, because I feel like of all of the final girls in the Friday the 13th franchise, Jenny is probably the best one. I know Alice is the first, but I think Jenny is the best one because she's the one that's always thinking forward and everything. Because she even says it earlier in the movie, like, what if it is some some adult man that has like a child mind that's out there and everything. She kind of reads it without even noticing. Like, she pretty much was spot on about him, but the last time we see her is her going to the hospital, and we never hear about that character again. And of course, none of the final girls from the first couple of movies we hear about ever again. It's funny how the only character of that franchise that gets a multiple story arc is Tommy Jarvis, which is not a final girl, it's a final guy, and we get to see him go from being a preteen to a young teen to a quote unquote teenager to an adult man in 4, 5, and 6, which is kind of interesting and everything. But then by the time we get to and of course in the 80s you still had a lot of other final girls in different movies and stuff like that, but I would say that Nancy and the Alice and Jenny's, I wouldn't even include Chris in that, because Chris in Friday the 13th Part 3, she survives through pure luck and plot armor and everything. But I would say that Trish in Part 4, she kind of falls into the same, she's almost like a mix of Alice and Jenny, because she takes the fight to Jason. And I mean, that whole sequence with her inside the party house and then deciding whether or not, okay, am I going to stand here and get murdered, or am I going to take this, or am I going to go dive through this window and just pray to God I don't die, which she don't. And then she ends up going back to the house and she has to live, because she was head hunting with that machete. If y'all ever watch that scene again in Friday the 13th part for the final chapter, when she goes back into the house after she's landed on her back on the ground, and she's standing there, she's like, oh God, I can just rest for a second. And then Jason just pulls up behind her like, yeah, that's right, you thought I wasn't going to come over here. And it's like she senses him behind her and she swings that machete, and it's like, oh, it's like he realized, like, wait a minute, this is a real fight here. And it wasn't until freaking lollipop head of Tommy come scooting down the steps looking crazy, and Jason, which allows the distraction for Trish to end up, hitting him in the side of the head with machete. But Trish is a good final girl also. But like I say, those first couple of final girls of Friday the 13th, with the exception of Chris, because like I said, Chris just kind of gets lucky, and like I say, plot armor is what saves her in that movie and everything. But by the time you get to the 90s, you kind of get a different type of final girl, because I would say, like in Night of the Living Dead, the remake, the Barbara in that one is completely different than the Barbara of the original. She is more the fighter. She is actually in charge. Ben becomes like, her second, talking once again about Tony Todd for a second, but Ben in that movie kind of becomes secondary to Barbara. It's like, no, I'm going to take the lead. I'm taking charge. And she becomes like the hero of that movie more so than Ben does. Like I said, you have her, then Helen in Candyman. I mean, I wouldn't say that Helen is necessarily a final girl. It's like Helen was just, messing around, effing around, and found out the hard way. Like you don't go putting people's names in your mouth if you ain't really ready for what's to come, and everything. But then in 1996, we get a little movie called Scream, and we get the granddaughter, I would say, of the hierarchy. You get one Miss Sidney Prescott, who is very much a mix of Laurie Strode and Nancy Thompson, to a degree, and how she's very much aware, because one thing about Wes Craven with the Scream movies, those are meta as hell movies. Of course, he begins the whole meta thing with New Nightmare, bringing back Nancy, Heather Langenkamp as Nancy, or Nancy as Heather Langenkamp, however you want to look at it, right, in that movie. And how she is a fighter and she does everything she can to save her son Dylan from good old Freddy Krueger, right? But then a few years later with Scream, and how we get Sidney Prescott, who's very much self-aware, and the fact that everyone is pretty much fans of horror movies, so they know all the tropes and they know what to pay attention for, and everything. Sidney is a different type of final girl, and it's like she has the blueprint that's been laid out in front of her by a Laurie Strode, by a Nancy, and everything. So she's able to fight, but she's more strong-willed. And in the end, I mean, the first couple of movies, the first two movies, they literally having to shoot the killer in the head, which is funny. And I always love the ending of the first movie where the three of them is Sidney, Gail, and Randy standing over Billy, and it's like, oh, they always come back for one final scare and pow, right in the head, right, and everything. And then the second movie does the same thing, and then she basically drops the gun. It's like a mic drop and walks away, type of thing, which is always fun to watch or whatever. But Sidney, like I say, Sidney is the what the 90s was like. Okay, we're taking charge and we have to be in more control, and that's what she does throughout the course of that franchise. Now coming up into more of the modern, more recent final girls, because you don't really get final girls in the same way that you did back in the late 70s, the 80s, and then the 90s. So a lot of final girls here like in more recent years, it's kind of far and in between. But I would say that Grace from Ready or Not, played by Samara Weaving, she would fit into, the same type of final girls of, years past, because she's very much self-aware, and also she cracks jokes and things like that. Because I always look at Ready or Not as almost like a horror version of Die Hard in a way, and she's the John McClane to a sense, if that makes sense to y'all that's listening, and everything. She's like that. And then of course, like I said, kind of bring it back full circle to Halloween 2018. Not so much Karen or even Laurie, but Allison. She's the new wave of final girl, of how she has to combat Michael Myers a little bit in the first movie. The second movie, to a degree, and then the third movie, she has this relationship with this serial killer, ish type, and how she deals with that whole situation, and everything. So Allison is, in a certain way, is like the new age of final girl, and it's the evolution. And ironically, she is the granddaughter of Laurie Strode, literally. So it's kind of fitting that she would have the type of arc that she has throughout the course of that trilogy and everything. But there's a lot of final girls that are very good and everything. Hell, I would even include Geraldine from Demon Knight, who's probably one of my favorites, and how she has to navigate through that whole entire situation, and how she becomes the final girl, and how she deals with the collector and all of that stuff and everything. She's one of my favorites when it comes to the whole, when we're talking about final girls. Geraldine, played by Jada Pinkett Smith, is very much up there and everything. So another side topic that I have here, talking about how the trauma and survival in horror, how it pretty much helps develop a character, especially if you have a franchise, and how it builds upon what the character started out being versus you just getting a one-off. I mean, again, like a Laurie Strode, like a Nancy Thompson, we get to see them grow through the course of their multiple appearances through their franchises. I mean, since I've talked about Laurie a bit, let's talk about Nancy for a while. Like I talked about her in the first Nightmare on Elm Street, how she loses her innocence, similar to Laurie and everything. But by the time we get to her in part 3, Dream Warriors, she's a little bit more mature. She has the gray streak, and she's really trying to help these kids because she has lived through what they're experiencing and everything, and she helps them as best she can. And unfortunately, she loses her life in the end, which I do feel like that was a mistake. They shouldn't have killed off Nancy in part 3, but I understood why, because you had to pass the torch on to Kristen. Unfortunately, the torch gets passed again from Kristen to Alice when we get to part 4 and everything. And I will always tell people this, that Alice is a great representation of how you go from being this innocent, I want to be out of the way person, to having to gain the courage through loss. Because you know what, I always say this, that Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, I always think that people kind of overlook the message of that movie, because the message to me has always been that, you find the courage, teenagers find the courage of being who they are, especially with the whole thing with the mirror that has all the pictures of it, so Alice can't see herself. But as the movie goes along and all of her friends are dying, you start to see she's gaining a bit of what made her friends who they are. It's like it's impacting her, and they're becoming a part of her, but she's stripping away the mirror. So by the time she's the only one left, all the pictures are gone, and she now has a part of them with her. And that whole mirror montage scene is always one of my favorites. And like I say, I always think that is what makes that movie great, is because of that message of, finding who you are. And once you know who you are, you can look yourself in the mirror and be proud of what you see and everything. And Alice is a great final girl also. and how, like I say, how she just becomes this ultimate badass, and the fact that she does beat the hell out of Freddy in that church. And I always tell people this too. The reason why Freddy had to learn how to fight against Jason is because of what Alice did to him in that church. Because if he didn't learn how to fight because of Alice, Freddy really would have got his behind whooped against Jason. Even though Jason do beat the hell out of him, but Freddy was doing some karate moves too. And I was like, yeah, because Alice whooped his ass in part 4. That's why, and everything, right? And everything. But it's always cool, like how, well, I won't say cool necessarily, but how trauma actually makes certain characters stronger. Like, as people are being picked off, you start to see whoever the final girl is, they become stronger, because it's like, okay, we're building up to this final confrontation between the final girl and whatever the big bad is. Like, we got to build up to that. So by the time they face the big bad, they have the courage to actually take them on, in a sense. And then too, like, look at Laurie's generational trauma. Like I say, it starts in Halloween, and then it continues in Halloween 2. And then by the time we get to H2O, she's very much in it. And she's told John about it, which is kind of weird, because I'm pretty sure as a kid, like, your parent comes to you like, hey, I just want to let you know, when I was a teenager, this madman showed up and he killed a bunch of my friends. He almost killed me. I managed to survive, and everything. Oh, and by the way, he's your uncle. And it's like, what? Right? Like, how would you deal with that? But she passes that trauma off onto him, and they have that blow up on the street. Like, Mom, like, he's dead. He's not coming back. Unbeknownst to them, like, no, he pulling up to the school. Like, yeah, that's right. I'm coming back. You know, I gotta see my sister and my nephew too. You know, type of thing. And then in the 2018, it's like, yeah, I'm pulling up once again. Oh, you got a daughter? Oh, you got a granddaughter too? All right. And everything, right? So, and the fact that, and I will say this, that how they kind of switch certain things. So with H2O, Laurie tells John, you know, about the family history and all that type of stuff. In Halloween 2018, Laurie has, not only does she tell Karen about what happened, she trains Karen also. But the difference is that they don't do that with Allison. And I find that very interesting, that because Karen tried to keep Allison away from it to a degree, but Allison ends up becoming a major part of everything. But the fact that Laurie trained Karen, but Karen wanted to keep her daughter away from what her mother had taught her, for the most part. But by the end, they all have been through their trauma, and that shot of them on the back of that pickup truck, where it's the 3 generations of Strode, you know, they're sitting there, and Allison has the knife, and it's like, no, you got the juice now, Allison, for the most part. And then also too, it's like how audiences connect to your final girls, the final survivors. Like, we all have our favorite final girls, I think, you know, for different reasons. Like, there's always someone that whether if you're a guy or a woman, you find certain final girls that you just latch onto, that you just really enjoy and you want to see more of. I mean, I think everyone is a fan of Laurie. Everyone's a fan of Nancy. But then when you get to like the Friday the 13th, you know, some people might like Alice. Some people might like Jenny. Some people might even like Chris, I think. Oh, no, I don't. You know what? I don't think a lot of too many people even are fans of Chris. I'm not sure. But then Trish, I mean, she's strong-willed and everything. But then you have Tina, you know, that comes along later on, and, you know, she got to put her psychic powers, you know, she basically has the Jean Grey against good old Jason Voorhees. Rennie, I wouldn't necessarily say she's a great final girl, because I think half of that movie she literally is drugged out of her mind, so she's on PCP. So half of what she's seeing, that, you know, in that second half of the movie is like, all right, how much of this is real and everything. And if it wasn't for the fact that the sewers was going to get flooded with toxic waste, you know, I think he does in Rennie and Sean, but that's a whole nother story. But I think throughout a lot of the horror films with final girls, we all have our favorites. Some we like more than others, but one thing that we all can talk about is how they deal with the face of fear, and deal with tragedy, and how they, basically come out the other side to a degree. And you watch a lot of their journeys. Like I say, again, Laurie Strode, you watch her journey. Sidney Prescott, we've watched and continue to see her journey through all of the madness. Nancy, we've seen hers up to a certain point. And then even if you want to kind of go into more sci-fi, you have the Ellen Ripleys of the world, who we've seen her journey through, the original Alien franchise, how she started out being a woman who just happens to be the final girl. And then by the time we get to the second movie, how she's the mother, and everything. She has to be motherly, but also still be the strong-willed individual. The third movie is like, man, I'm over this shit. And I'm just here, and I got to deal with this nonsense. And then in Resurrection, it's like, yeah, that person to me, that one's dead. But, I mean, it's still some of her blood is still in the Ripley clone. So it's like it's still a part of her DNA, but it's like I'm a little bit more advanced than what that one was, because that one died and everything. So like I said, we've seen how characters deal with and go through, the trauma over the course of franchises, and or even if it was just for one film, like like Danny in Midsummer, how she has to go through all of that craziness, and everything, and in the end, she's a part of it, but still, that's a wild journey to have to sit and watch, and everything. So, I've talked a lot about like older final girls, and I've talked quite a bit about some of the newer final girls, but let's talk more about some of the new age final girls, because in the Scream reboots, I'm talking about parts 5 and 6, Sam and Tara, like, they are the new age final girls in the way of, this is because of the time they would be very much like these women. Sam is, not only is she the daughter of a serial killer, I always compare Sam to being like the woman version of Dexter. She's the killer of killers in a way, but she has that kind of, it's always in the back of her mind of where, she could easily just become the killer her freaking self. But it's like that other half of her, and also Tara's there as a reminder to like, no, you can be good. You kill the killers. You don't kill your friends, but you kill the killers. And everything. Again, talking about Grace from Ready or Not, the John McClane of the final girls, in my opinion. And everything, how she had to navigate through, okay, this is my new family. Oh, but we do this hide and seek thing. Oh, and if no, they can literally kill me. Oh, all right. So that's the game we playing. Okay, I'm going to flip the script on y'all to a degree. And everything. Like these newer age final girls, they have a little bit more to give than what the archetypes, I should say, gave, because it's very meta. So in a way, they're able to navigate situations a little bit better, because they can look back at, the ones who came before them in a way. And yeah, I always like how the newer age final girls, to a degree, how they pretty much, they have the older generations to look back on in order for them to be able to survive, and everything, and how they reinvent certain scenarios that we've seen in previous films, but they do it in a different degree, and they're more aggressive. They will take the fight more so to the big bad than what the others would, where it was like sheer survival. It's like, no, we're going to flip the script and take it back and put, the killer in the victim spot to a degree, and everything. And just how also too, over the years, how the final girls have become very diverse. I know a lot of people, they look at Sam and Tara as the quote unquote final girls, but then you have Mindy, who in my opinion is the final girl too, and I think is a great character, and it would have been cool if if you said, hey, we're gonna make, instead of it being Sam and Tara, if they would have said Mindy and Chad was gonna be the main protagonists because of the fact of their tie to Randy as being their uncle and just how they are when it comes to horror films and everything like that, I would have been cool with that, because those are great characters and they represent a lot more, and also it diversifies what, you know, a final girl can be. Mindy is a perfect example of that, and everything. And me personally, I would like to see more when it comes to horror, like heroines and final girls and everything, having to be more people of color, especially black girls. Like I said, going back to Geraldine in Demon Knight, I mean, that's a great example. Or even Rocky in the Phantasm movie, especially Phantasm 3. Rocky is a great freaking character, and everything. So yeah, it would be cool, like, to see more of that in horror films. So going back to talking about Laurie for a few minutes here. I mean, Laurie's place in the horror pop culture. I mean, I call her the mother. Some could say she's the first lady. She's, you know, the queen, you know, the scream queen, and everything like that. But I don't think anyone necessarily can replace what Laurie Strode was. And I don't know if we would have certain characters who come along in the 80s, if we would have those characters like that, if there wasn't a Laurie Strode. And also, too, the fact that Jamie Lee Curtis herself is a horror ambassador. I mean, even though she's done a lot of films outside of horror, she still enjoys the genre. She still has fond memories talking about playing Laurie, or even has done other horror-ish type of films. I mean, even though it's not a great movie, but Virus, I mean, she's in that, and she's somewhat in her Laurie Strode-ish way, and everything. But the fact that she still champions the horror genre and the relationship that she has with John Carpenter, you know, it just shows like she doesn't forget where her career pretty much started, in a way, because when you look at the fact that she has been in Halloween and The Fog with John Carpenter, and then she's done other horror films, Prom Night, Terror Train, you know, Road Games, which is an underrated horror movie, I think. But she still enjoyed talking about and being a part of the genre. I think that's another reason why she continues to come back to being Laurie Strode, because if she didn't enjoy it, I don't think she would continue to do it. Like others have, you know, done horror films and then they've acted like, I was never a part of it. Talking about somebody named Jennifer Aniston, Leprechaun, or Renee Zellweger in, you know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, you know, type of thing. But she always comes back and she always wants to see the progression, you know, moving not only the character, but also the franchise forward in a positive way. And the fact that Laurie has no problem fighting Michael Myers. You know, we've seen that. I mean, it starts in it. We get a glimpse of it a little bit in the original Halloween. We get more of it in H2O. We get it quite. I mean, at the beginning part of Resurrection, even though Laurie loses that battle, but in the new trilogy, we get to see it throughout the course of that trilogy, and she has no problem squaring up with Michael Myers. I mean, it's a great rivalry. It's probably one of the best rivalries in the horror genre, if you ask me, and everything. So before we wrap this episode up, I actually did put a poll up. This poll actually was last week and everything, because this episode was supposed to be recorded last week, but like I say, life sometimes gets in the way. So I asked a question over on Threads. I asked the question. I said, who's the ultimate final girl in horror? And the 4 choices that I gave was Nancy from Nightmare on Elm Street, Sidney from Scream, Laurie from Halloween, and Geraldine from Demon Knight. And with 33% of the vote, which actually surprised me a little bit, Geraldine get the win in this poll. It started out a a little rough because Geraldine at the beginning was getting 0% of the vote, but then I guess some people swept in and they picked Geraldine and she got 33% of the vote and everything. So Geraldine is the winner of the Ultimate Final Girl poll. But then there were a few people who commented, some others. I don't know how to pronounce this name. So, but this person, they said that Susie Bannon from Suspiria said she was a final girl before the term was even invented. You know, okay, so here's the funny thing. You know, I've never actually watched Suspiria. I know I'm saying that I know I'm saying this, and I just thought about it. But I've never watched the original or the remake. So I probably need to add that to my list of movies to watch. Miles said that Jenny from Friday the 13th Part 2, and I agree with Jenny is a great choice as well. But yeah, though. Let's see. Anybody else saying it? Okay. So yeah, those were a few of the ones that commented who they felt, because I did, as I said, to drop your favorite in the comments. So even if you didn't have your favorite a part of the poll, you could drop your favorites in the comments. And so, like I say, Susie from Suspiria and Jenny got some love as well and everything like that. Yeah, so Geraldine gets the win. I do thank everyone who comment or cast their vote and everything. I will be having another poll up for the next episode, but I'll talk more about that in a little while as far as the topic that I'll be doing. But yeah, the next I've been enjoying the 60 Nights of Fright, and hopefully you guys have been too. Thank you everyone for tuning in and listening to these different episodes. I've been trying, I want to do something a little different for this Halloween season, because it seems like every Halloween season I try to do something a little different, and this one I am trying to, shake it up a bit. I didn't want to review movies for every week. Not saying that it's a bad thing, but sometimes it's good to shake it up sometimes, right? And just because of the fact that I took this week off, I am officially letting it be known on this episode that yes, I will be continuing 60 Nights of Fright over into November. So we're going to be getting 90 Nights of Fright, basically. So yes, the fun will continue into November. Pretty much all of November, I feel that it will be all about the horror spooky season, continuing it on and everything like that. So to close up this episode, the legacy of Laurie Strode is pretty much set in stone. We all know about what Laurie is, what she has accomplished throughout the course of the Halloween franchise, what she means to the horror genre, and also how she's influenced and impacted other final girls throughout the horror genre as well. I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode. I had a lot of fun talking about not only Laurie Strode, but some of the other final girls and things of that nature. Hopefully you enjoyed me talking about it as well. Of course, if you're listening on YouTube, comment down below how you feel about Laurie Strode as a final girl, as well as the evolution of the final girls, and who are some of your favorite final girls. You can definitely comment down below. Let me know what your thoughts are on not only just Laurie Strode, but final girls as well. If you're listening on Spotify as well, you can do the same, because Spotify has it set up now where you can actually leave comments on each episode, which I think is a great thing. I want to thank everyone for listening. If you want to find me across social media, of course, you can find me primarily on Threads at The J Giles, but I'm also on Instagram at The J Giles. That's my personal page. Or you can follow the movie page as well. That's JMT Podcast. Of course, you can find all of the Movie Talk episodes a part of the TV Zone Podcast Network, wherever you listen to your podcast at. Or if you want to check us out on the website, www.tvzonepodcastnetwork.com and everything. Of course, follow the YouTube where you get all of the Movie Talk, as well as some of the shorts there from clips from each episode, as well as some other stuff that I'm going to be uploading on the YouTube as well. So definitely follow over on YouTube as well. Also check me out on Twitch. I'm trying to get a little bit more consistent over there. Mostly that is more gameplay, and everything, but I do take breaks in between playing Call of Duty to talk about different topics and everything like that. So definitely follow me over on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/the_real. That's REEL_JAY. You can follow me over there as well. And everything. But like I say, primarily if you want to talk with me on a regular basis, you can definitely follow me over on Threads and everything. I'm also trying to get back more into Facebook. So if anybody who follows me on Facebook, you're starting to see I'm posting a little bit more on Facebook. So yeah, I'm just trying to, reach everyone that follows me and just trying to stay more in contact with everyone also. So again, thank you guys for listening to this episode, and I will be back for episode 357. Can't believe 357. Who would have thought, right? I'll be back for episode 357, where I will be talking about my top 5 underrated horror films from the 2000s. So yeah, that's going to be a cool episode to talk about some 2000s horror, because I'm coming more up into, trying to get more into current, even though I've been talking more about some of the older stuff, but get more into the current. I did talk about the Final Destination franchise, but, and I did talk about The Descent and everything, but I will be talking more about some of the other current horror stuff, at least from the 2000s. So, yeah, be on the lookout for that, and everything like that. So again, thank you guys for listening. I will be back for episode 357. Until next time, peace.